Hey you guys, so I want to make a video on freeze protection. I kind of already have one out there, but I'm doing it again because we have such a big freeze coming and I really want everyone to be prepared as best they can. So before we get into a quick overview, we have a freeze coming that is going to be a radiative freeze. So versus some freezes that we have come in with the wind, and the wind is pulling heat away. It's like an advective cooling effect, and those are really, you can't do as much to prepare for them because the wind is just going to blow sheets away and make it harder to protect. And this freeze that's coming is going to just sit on top of us, and it's going to sit with that cold air so long that it's cold air is going to sink through all the way down to ground level, and all of our warm air is going to leave and go up, and it's basically going to invert. And so this is the kind of freeze where we can have a big impact if we are able to keep the heat from leaving the ground so quickly. So a big thing that I've learned that was a negative is that the ground itself is where the heat is coming from. It's the warmest thing, and so if we block a lot of that with a lightweight mulch like leaves and bags and things like that, our plant leaf area, the part that we want to protect, is actually going to be colder. It's going to have less of that warmth radiating up, so we don't necessarily want to preserve it down under the soil. Now that said, if you have plants that are full-on tropicals and potentially going to lose them completely if the soil itself freezes, if we get a freeze just a couple inches down, kill the whole trunk, then that would help to mound a lot of material up. It is always better if the material you can mound is denser and more able to pull the heat up out of the soil rather than being like an insulative layer, but more like a dense mulch that would kind of connect to the soil and pull it up. So if you're trying to really bank a tree and protect something that you might lose completely, try and find soil ideally, or mulch to bank it with rather than just some bags of leaves. Because again, plastic, so that advective, the wind kind of cooling like a convection oven, all of those flat surfaces like plastic surfaces are very fast to lose the heat. And so if you covered anything with plastic, or if you had a plastic bag of leaves, the first place the heat would disappear from is off that surface. So in this freeze, because it is sitting for so long, it might help you in some regards, but it's just something to be careful of. So in this freeze, we're trying to capture and slow the heat that's going to leave the soil and keep it around the plants. And so one thing new that I'm not going to be able to document now because I want to put this out so you guys can start planning and preparing, is that I'm going to be putting some drop cloths, some canvases up high this year at about like 10, 12 feet, just stretch out in the areas where I have larger trees now because I have more of a food forest. And I'm going to be trying to capture heat at a scale of not protecting individual trees, but kind of protecting the whole of the property. Because the way air works at really cold temperatures, it becomes more like a liquid. Things kind of flow and move more slowly. And so what I'm experimenting with is going to be basically using my little orchard heaters. So these are all just Tiki torches that I've found over the years for free from trash piles, and using them to create heat and then catch and spread that heat. So all of this is inspired by how old-timey days they used to protect their citrus orchards with something called a smudge pot. So it was just a bigger version of this, and essentially the way it worked was not by providing heat for the trees. The way it worked was these kerosene oil kind of lamps or burning tools burned so dirty that it created smog. And the smog, because again, it's cold and it's liquidy, so that stuff's moving, the smog particles would stay 20 feet or less close to the surface of the earth, and it was the smog itself that was protecting the citrus orchards. So I'm hoping to capitalize on that. So that's what I've got here. I'm starting to fill up my kerosene tiki torch fuels and getting them placed out in ideal spots. I think if you want to try something similar, I would encourage it. They just, let me show you how they burn. So you can see like that black billowy smoke. The first year I tried these, I tried to create radiative heaters. So I put them in a setup kind of like this, and then I covered them with all these elaborate clay pots. And what ended up happening, because this was going to capture the heat and then radiate it outwards, basically slow its departure. So it's the same principle, but it would get so, billowed up with smoke inside of the pot that it would not deliver a lot of heat to the pot itself, and it would sometimes even put out the torch itself. So that is, you can see, that is something where I think you could experiment with it, but if you wanted to go with a radiative heater, if you wanted to go with a radiating heating device for, like if you had a small tree or something, I would go with candles. So if you can run out and get just like a tea light candle, you could do this system more successfully because that's a cleaner burn and it's all just about capturing the heat. You could even put a rock, just leave maybe a little vent, and so you have all that heat, and then that would radiate out near the trunk. Sorry. So that's not what I'm going for so much. I'm going to try and capture maybe slow a little bit, but mostly it's going to be creating that smog across the garden and using some big canvases to capture it. So I've got 13 gallons of kerosene, and I've got multiple days to try this on, so it'll be interesting to see. So I think that's the gist of it. I wish you guys well. Remember, when you're covering, this is not my system, but when you're covering trees, just really broad and wide and down to the ground, even putting some bricks on it, and that we're going to have a big rain coming before, so try and not cover until after the rain, so your sheets don't get all heavy and wet and end up stressing plants out in that regard. And then the last thing, I can take you around for videos, but water buckets. So a really important practice for our light freezes is to put big old buckets of water around the base of each tree, because water, as it freezes, as it goes through that state change, it releases a lot of heat, and that heat can drift up and be captured by all the leaves, and that can give you a few degrees. So that's a really important part of a practice. However, in the freeze that's coming, they've already pushed it back, so it was going to arrive Saturday, now it's not really till Saturday or Sunday, now it's Sunday, Monday. So the way it means it's moving really slowly, and so this freeze is going to sit on top of us for a long time. And when that happens, the water, it loses its values, because its first value is as a thermal mass, so it's heavy and dense, and it's going to lose its heat slowly because of that. And then it's also going to give off heat as it freezes. But once it's fully frozen, the water can actually allow the area around it to drop even more. So we might not get a huge yield from the water buckets in this kind of a freeze. But if you're not in my situation, if you have hot running water, then you could get a huge yield just by refilling the warm water buckets before each night. All right, you guys, I hope you got something from this video, and I really encourage you to do some preparation. This freeze to me feels like so legit that I'm even digging up some plants to protect them. I'm taking a Barbados cherry acerola, out of the ground to bank it in the garage, and just, the more we can prepare, the better we'll feel when the time comes, and the better we'll feel with even having to detach from what is lost. And one last thing, because it just popped to mind, is don't forget to also protect your water lines, because this is definitely one. So I've got that line to clear out and drain, and we suddenly have to prepare like we're way up north. So I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.